Barutit at saka Paige Kimik-Sana-Kreps. Tuktayaktu Miuk Tsayuyunga. Toronto Miunguvunga. Good afternoon, my name is Paige Kimik-Sana-Kreps. I am originally from Tuktayaktuk, but now I live in Toronto. I was born in Inuvik, actually. I lived there from 1994 to 1997. I was there with my mom, my dad, my half-brother, and my brother Pierce. When I was about 3 years old, my brother and my dad and I moved to Toronto. So we lived here for about a year in like 1997, and then we moved to a few smaller towns. So we lived in Brighton, in Colborne, and then in Port Hope, which are all pretty close to Toronto. So I grew up not knowing my mom and not knowing who she was. So my mom is Inuit, Inuvik from Inuvik and Tuk, and my dad is American. He grew up in Minnesota, but then worked up north for a little while. So I kind of grew up not really knowing anything about my Inuit culture. I had a very loving family here. My dad remarried when I was 4. So it was a small family of me, my dad, my brother, and my stepmom. And I guess you could say it was just like small town Ontario life. Luckily we had like a really big yard, and I was always tobogganing, swimming, running around with my brother, wrestling, just what kids do. I didn't really notice that I was very different at first. Like, I knew my brother and I maybe had a little darker skin. I'm very pale. I have white privilege for sure, white passing. I mean, just growing up in a small town, I had a bunch of friends. In Colborne, I lived there until I was 10, so I had a core group of friends. I was enjoying life there. Nothing really felt different. My dad would tell me that I'm Inuit, but I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't know if I was First Nations. I didn't know like the right terminology to use. So I pretty much just walked in this world as a white person. I went to a private school for 2 years. When I was in grade 7 and 8, I had gotten a scholarship. I had gone with my best friend who was also on scholarship, so we were already kind of seen as like the others, not really fitting in there. And then I kind of noticed that I was really Inuit there because one of the teachers was very fascinated and wanted to like change the curriculum and make it more inclusive, which is great. But she got me to read a book about Inuit kids living in the north. She's like, what do you think of this? Like, do you agree? Is everything true? And I was like, I don't really know. Like, that's not my lived experience. So I guess that was one point when I noticed that I was different and I was treated differently because of it. Like, not in a bad way, just in a way that made me think like, wow, like I really don't know anything about my culture yet. And there, I guess that was when I started to notice I was different. And then throughout high school, there were a few Indigenous kids. There was a reserve nearby, so I kind of felt like akin to them. It's like, wow, there are other people that look a little bit more like me, and I wasn't just a white kid anymore. I don't know. I didn't really think about being Indigenous until I met my mom, and I was in university as well. So I never really had a relationship with her as a kid. I didn't even really know if she was around. But I had my family, so I was happy that way. But she wrote a letter to me and my brother when I was, I think, 12, and I was like, wow, like she really exists. This is her. And I was able to go up to Yellowknife to meet her when I was 15. So that was my first solo trip. I was so nervous, and when I got there, she's like, wow, you're all grown up. You're a woman now. Like, it was very emotional, and she felt a bit like a stranger, but I really knew that she was my family, and I felt like I was at home there. I met a bunch of cousins, and I was able to try some country food and really start to feel like I belonged. And then that was a good relationship to have. I was visiting Yellowknife quite a lot, and then I started my education at UBC. So at UBC, I was in the business school, and I definitely got in by, like talking about my Indigenous ancestry, but then I didn't really engage with other Indigenous students there. I didn't feel like educated enough. I felt like I would be ostracized for not knowing who I was and not knowing like the right terminology to use. I ended up working for an Indigenous organization at the university, and I also took a class in First Nations business ventures. And it was really great to connect with a couple other Indigenous students, and also one of my professors was Indigenous, and they really recognized that I was on my journey and it was not something to be ashamed of. It was kind of just a product of colonialism, a product of growing up in the South, and all the things that made me who I was. So I felt very welcome there. But other than that, I didn't really engage with many other Indigenous students or organizations. So my brother, Pierce Krebs, he's kind of been my role model through all this. He started his journey in reclaiming his identity a lot earlier than me, and I saw how he was working for different Indigenous organizations. He was volunteering and doing research with Indigenous professors, and he encouraged me to apply for this position at the Toronto Inuit Association. It was kind of a surprise that I got the job, and I thought it would be a perfect way to start because I didn't know if I wanted to live up north yet. I'm very much a city girl, but this way I had the best of both worlds, where I got to work for an Inuit organization and also live back in Toronto, where I feel really at home. After university, I really wanted to travel, so I thought the best way to save money would be living in Yellowknife with my mom and saving money. So I got a job with the government, and I was able to work 9 to 5 and also coach gymnastics on the side, which is something I really loved. And that summer, I really became a lot closer to my family. So another family member that's really important to me is my half-sister, Dakota. She's a few years younger than me, and she was adopted out of our family. So my mom didn't raise her, and she wasn't really allowed to contact us until she was 16. So when she was 16, she reached out to both my mom and me and was like, wow, I'm so happy to have a sister. I've never had this before. I can't wait to meet you. And I got to meet her shortly afterwards. We're so different, but we clicked so quickly. She was really my best friend up north. So I guess the main reason I grew up without my mom is because she was an alcoholic and she battled addictions, and she wasn't really in the right space to be a mother at the time that we were there. This could kind of be attributed to her going to day schools, Indian day schools, and kind of the intergenerational trauma of not really having parental figures to look up to. She didn't really know how to raise kids. She wasn't given the supports. So I think that part of her life has really shaped my life, because I did grow up without a mom. I did grow up thinking about addictions and worried if I would become an addict as well. Yeah, I guess my identity until now, I knew I was Inuk, but I was never very comfortable with it. I didn't feel like I had earned the title or earned the position in community because I didn't know any of my teachings. One instance that I remember is that a friend took me to a beading circle, and I was really excited. I love the energy of being around Indigenous women, and they're all laughing and having a good time, but I had never done beading before, so I tried, and they made fun of me and said my beading was loose and that it didn't look very good and I shouldn't do beading. And I was like, oh no, this is my first time, I don't know how to feel now. And to this day, I haven't beaded. And I definitely will soon. Those words don't really affect me anymore, but they did for a long time. Just people making fun of you for not knowing your culture and being at the beginning of your journey has really affected me. I've also had somebody say I'm not white or I'm too white to be Inuk. I don't look Inuk, so I shouldn't be in this position. And that's also affected me. So yeah, statements like those where I was kind of told that I wasn't Inuk enough, I wasn't Indigenous enough, it really dissuaded me from joining Indigenous community. When I came here, I was lucky to have a cousin who is Shuswap. She's Indigenous as well. And she brought me to a powwow and to some other like rallies and actions. And I really felt that like camaraderie of being in the same room as a bunch of Indigenous people. But then I wasn't able to describe who I was. Like it was kind of that pan-Indigenous world that is very common in Toronto. Like everyone gets along and it's great, but I didn't know who I was individually. I didn't try to learn more because I was so nervous. So when I started working for the Toronto Inuit Association, I started to feel more confident, and as a program coordinator, I got to create sewing programs, cultural programs, language, where it would be for Inuit only. And there would often be people say like, oh, I'm white, why can't I join? Oh, I'm Native, why can't I join? And I really had to stress that it's so important that this is an Inuit only space, because that's how we can learn from our elders. That's how we can learn about our language, our culture, our family, by just being in a room where we're comfortable to be who we are. I've been able to move forward, and I've been able to feel more confident about my identity as Inuvik by reaching out not just to Inuit here, but also to my family up north. So I was super lucky to go up north in the summer of 2018. I went to Inuvik and Tuktoyaktuk for the first time since I was a baby, and I was met by so many cousins. I think like most of Tuktoyaktuk is related to me. So it was really great to go somewhere where people looked like me, people knew who my family was. They're like, oh, you're Valerie's daughter, so nice to meet you. I met you when you were a baby and I used to babysit you. And it just felt so good being up there, like putting my feet on the land. And we went hunting, we went berry picking, and all the good stuff about being up north, and I felt so at home. And that really inspired me to continue learning about myself and also to help others learn about themselves. And right now I have such a great group of friends and colleagues here in Toronto and even across the world. Like through social media, we're so connected with other Inuit everywhere, and it's so great to see people reclaiming their identity and being confident about the journey that they're on, and that it's not a destination, it's like a lifelong journey. And I'm seeing so many friends that are just reclaiming in such a positive way and remolding traditions and just becoming such a great community of urban Inuit and urban Indigenous. That really inspires me. Yeah, I've been seeing sometimes how lateral violence tears us down so much. It's like a new form of colonization, how like we're tearing each other down instead of other like outside people tearing us down, and that's really, really affecting us and the way we can work with our communities and the way we can connect with people like us. It's really, really hard, and it really affects me deeply when I see it happening to other people, how they're not able to do the work that they love. They're not able to be who they are because our own people are tearing each other down and bullying, and it's really disheartening, and it makes it harder for me to do the work that I do as a community worker. When I see this happening, I'm like, is it gonna get better? Am I gonna be able to work through this? How are things gonna change? The big answer to this is community care, and one of my friends told me this term lateral love that I really, really enjoy. Instead of lateral violence, we need lateral love. It's coming up on 1 year since Kelly Fraser unfortunately ended her life, and that was a big turning point for me. That was kind of when I was at my lowest and feeling like Inuit are just tearing each other down. Out of that, there were so many Inuit youth and other Inuit that said, like, this is a crisis, we need to address this. How are we gonna address it? And organically, there was so many like social media movements and people speaking out about their mental health and helping others. And since then, I've spent a lot of time with my friends and my colleagues just talking about the good things and focusing on all the good. Like, I don't want to have like toxic positivity where we only talk about the good, but it has to be a balance where we recognize these things that are going on in our community, and we combat it with lateral love, with lateral care, and say, like, these people are hurting. We need to work together as a community to show the good things about being Inuit. We need to do language lessons. We need to do sewing, bringing each other together to do something that we love, and showing that community is so important and that we can be happy together. And I think one of the places this is most apparent is when we have feasts. Obviously, we love our country food. It feels like we're back up north when we have some tuktu and some maktak. So when we're all sitting around that table sharing country food, it really, really feels like anything's possible. Like, we're such a great community, such a strong community. There are so many different voices around the table that deserve to be heard. I felt like, as an urban Inuk that grew up in the South, like, my experience is very different from a person that lived up north and then recently moved down. We have very different experiences, but neither one of them is more important or less important. We really can work together to, like, create an even stronger community by hearing both of our voices. The future for me as an urban Inuk is more reclamation and making more space for Inuit in the South. So as I mentioned earlier, like, I had always found spaces that were Indigenous or pan-Indigenous, but there weren't always the spaces that were Inuit only in the South. So my job at the Toronto Inuit Association is really to carve that space out and to say, you are allowed to be Inuk here. You are allowed to learn your language, you're allowed to eat country food, you're allowed to be together with community and be Inuk. Being Inuk in the South is not less important than being Inuk in the North. But I also think that a lot of us down here are starved for culture, starved for connection to the North, and I really want to make it easier for there to be a connection. I've only been up to my home community once, and it's really, really hard to get up again. It's really hard to connect with family that are up there. And things like our sewing and our programming and having country food really make it feel like we're in the North. But I really hope that there's more opportunities for urban Inuit to go up north and also for Inuit to come down south, so that we can learn both ways and so that we can really reconnect with our family. Because I think that's a part of my journey in the future is really spending more time with my family. I've learned so many amazing teachings from Inuit down here, but not necessarily from my Inuvik background. So I really hope that in the future, urban Inuit will be able to connect more with the Nuna and with their families and people. When I'm walking through the streets of Toronto, it can feel like a metropolis and a concrete jungle, but I always find myself returning to the water and returning to any kind of nature that there is around, because there are a lot of concrete buildings here, but there's also a lot of nature, and I really feel at home when I'm closest to nature. Even in a big city like this, I've been able to find a community, and I have such a great group of friends that are young Indigenous innovators. They're really striving every day to be better and to create more opportunities for Indigenous youth like them, and seeing them really inspires me to continue doing what I'm doing and also continue the journey I'm on. Creating a relationship with my mom had a few rocky bits to it. It wasn't always a perfect relationship. I harbored a lot of anger towards her when I was younger, because I grew up without her, and I really felt like she was doing this to me. But throughout the years, talking to her, talking to my family, talking to others that knew her, I realized how strong of a woman she was, and she's really combated so many hard things in her life, and she has overcome her addiction. She is working and has family, has friends, has a life in Yellowknife, and I get to be a part of that life now, and that feels so special. So I didn't grow up with her, but now I get to spend time with her, and we're learning together how to be a family, and I see so many similarities between her and me. People always talk about us having the same smile, the same cheekbones, and it really feels good to have that connection now. And I feel the same way about my sister, my half-sister Dakota. She and I look different, but we also have those same cheekbones, the same eyes, and we'll drive around town listening to country music, and it'll feel like home, even though it's so different from my life in Toronto. It's like, it's a second home up there. I recognize that I come from a place of privilege. I'm white passing. I grew up basically as a white person. I have a university education, and I've been given opportunities that others might not have. So as much as I'm taking every opportunity that's given to me, I also want to pave a pathway for others that were not given the opportunity. So I want to be able to create opportunity for Inuit that do not have a Western education but have Inuit traditional knowledge. And I want to create a space where they don't feel racism and where they don't feel like they're different for having darker skin tone. I want to be able to use my privilege to create space for every kind of Inuk.